Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. My guest is Julian Bayliss. He's a biodiversity and protected area specialist. And he's found a secret forest in the country of Mozambique. So, Julian, thanks for coming. How you doing?
Hey, good evening, Richard. I'm doing fine. Greetings from a rather blustery mountain in North Wales in the UK.
Oh, right now you're in North Wales? Very nice.
This my UK base is here. When I'm not in Africa, and then I'm here. I'm supposed to be in Ethiopia. My job at the moment is working for the Ethiopian Wildlife Conservation Authority on what we know is called a GEF project, a Global Environment Facility project. This one is through the UND, and I'm supposed to be there, but because of COVID-19, I've been sort of repatriated back to my UK home base, which is on a wee mountain in North Wales, where I have a converted chapel, which is my home.
I hope there's interesting stuff to explore, at least in your local area too.
Yeah, it's great. North Wales is beautiful. It's there's still a lot of wilderness here. You have rolling oak forests coming down to the sea, and these oak forests are very ancient, hundreds and hundreds of years old. There's lots of mountains, Snowdonia National Park. There's a lot of beauty. There's a lot of places to explore. Yeah, Wales is good. North Wales is a very nice place to be based if you're not exploring various inaccessible areas of Africa.
Well, how did you first find out about this forest in Mozambique, and where is it located?
Sure. Well, the expedition to Mount Lico is building on about 15 years of biodiversity research, biodiversity surveys in this part of Africa. It's part of a larger conservation program to try and bring attention and focus to the high altitude mountains of southern Malawi and northern Mozambique to generate an interest towards their protection. And the expeditions, and this is one of a series that's been going on for the last 15 years, is all about finding that evidence base to provide the evidence base in order, to provide the justification to generate funds and management strategies, etc., to try and protect these places.
Well, this particular forest, has anyone lived there ever, as far as you can tell, and where is it? Right,
well, it's in northern Mozambique, in Zambezia. The local people surrounding the base know of nobody who's ever been there. And we asked the communities on all sides of the mountain, and they said, no, we don't go there. We can't get there. It's too difficult to get there. There's no paths, etc. You have to try and climb the rocks, and we don't know anybody who's ever done it. But what they did say, which is quite interesting, is that they talked of a tribe of little people who lived up in the forest on top of this Inselberg. And they said if you walk to the base of the mountain, the base of the rock, they'll throw snakes down you. And they also talked about, in colonial days, some Portuguese climbers, I presume from the Portuguese army at the time, trying to scale it, but the ropes snapped and they all fell down and died. So the local people say that the little people at the top cut the ropes. So the local people know of nobody who's ever been up there. We went up there in the knowledge that there was no record of humans being up there. However, we did find some pieces of pottery. Now, this is very interesting because the pottery was around the only stream that originates from the basin of Mount Lico. So Mount Lico is essentially round. It's a crater. It looks a bit like a volcano. And in that crater is a basin of forest. It is not strictly a volcano. It hasn't been formed as a volcano would, leaving a crater, a crater rim, if you like. It's an Inselberg, which was molten rock, which bubbled up through metamorphic rock, which was softer rock. And then,
can you picture this as like a donut laying on the land? Is that what it looks like, kind of?
That's it, pretty much like a donut. And it was igneous rock, it was molten, and it bubbled up through softer rock and then cooled. This one cooled in the shape of a donut. And then the surrounding softer rock weathered away to expose the crater. And then in this crater formed a forest, a wet forest, a rainforest, if you like. And that rainforest has essentially been stable or been there for hundreds of thousands, if not longer, years.
That's really cool. How high are the cliffs? And did you helicopter in there, or you guys climbed?
No, we didn't have the budget for a helicopter. But I did buy a drone, and I went. I found this place in about 2012 using satellite imagery, but it took a few years of planning to find the time to sort of, and the window of opportunity to actually try and locate it on the ground. So, there's two stages to, if you like, these type of expeditions. The first is trying to find the sites, and this is where essentially modern technology provides an advantage. We have an advantage over, for example, scientific expeditions that maybe occurred 100 odd years ago, in the sense that we have satellite imagery, we have high resolution satellite imagery that we can look down into large inaccessible areas and see with our own eyes in almost real time what the landscape looks like. And so going through satellite imagery, in Google, there's nothing wrong with Google Earth. You can use Google Earth. I've used Google Earth a lot. I used Google Earth for the first discovery, which was Mount Mabu in 2005. And that turned out to be the largest rainforest in southern Africa. And in a way, that's where everything started, based on that discovery in 2005. And then since this time, we've been exploring several other mountains. And Liko is one I saw using the satellite imagery in 2012. But then it took a few years to sort of plan the time and the opportunity to go and have a look. Because it's in the African bush, it's nowhere near a tarmac road. So you have to come off the road, and then you actually have to figure out how you get to the mountain through the African bush. Often it's difficult to see roads, especially dirt roads, if they're covered in vegetation. And often the bridges have gone. So you can drive down a road for maybe 10 kilometers, a dirt road for 10, 15 kilometers. And then you'll come it's heading in the right direction, but then you'll come to a river crossing where the bridge has collapsed. And there's necessarily no way of getting through that. So you have to turn around, go back and start again. So it's all quite a lot of trial and error trying to figure out a way to get there. So on the first recce, I got about 6 kilometers away, had to stop the car, and then I walked to the base of the mountain because I could then see it in the distance. And luckily on that occasion, I bought a drone. So I was able to fly the drone up and over the crater, and then look down to confirm with my own eyes, with the video footage, that we were actually dealing with a basin full of forest, which was tremendously exciting. That was that Eureka moment of discovery, of confirmation of what you had envisaged was there to the actuality that it is there. And that's
how big is how high were the cliffs, and how big is the top of the donut?
It's about half a kilometer up. So there is a lower point than that, which is the part that we climbed up, but pretty much 3/4 of the way around, it rises between 400 to 600 meters from the ground. That's about half a kilometer. So you're really pushing the height of the drone, because the drone only goes up to about 500 meters. So we had to find a spot which was about 400 meters to the crater, and then fly the drone up and over that. Wow. Yeah, and then it's really figuring out, how we're going to get up there, and how we're going to investigate the forest. So the local people confirmed that basically, they knew of nobody who'd ever been up there. And the reason being is you can't get there. You have to, there's no roads, there's no routes, there's no paths. And it's a sheer rock face, which is essentially impenetrable. So that then confirmed the fact that we needed to bring in some professional climbers to assist us.
So they thought, pygmies lived up there and wouldn't let anyone go up there?
You come across that a lot in Africa. It's not just Liko. In many mountains that I've been to, the story of the mythical little people, the tribe of little people, the Mbatwa, that live on the top, comes out quite often. It's a story we hear quite a lot. So where does that come from? I don't know. But the interesting thing about Liko is we found this pottery. Now, the pottery was close to the stream. And as we walked up the stream, and this is shattered pottery, as we walked up the stream, we came across 3 upturned pots. So these are big earthenware clay pots that had been turned over and placed on the ground, and there were 3 of them, like in a triangle, and these were near the source of the stream. So upon further investigation, that these would appear to be offerings to the gods to keep the streams flowing, to keep the water flowing, because the stream flows off the side of the Inselberg, off side of the mountain, and into the flatlands below. And of course, that water is then required to irrigate the crops, irrigate the land, and especially during the dry season, so that there's water, so the crops can grow and the local people can live off the crops. So it's a phenomenon known as a rainmaker mountain, and it's been found on a few other places in this part of Africa as well. And this is essentially ceremonial. But the interesting thing here is that the pots, that the local people or the local communities around them didn't know of anybody who'd been up there. So these pots predate local knowledge. So we're talking, and the shattered pottery is a different age to the upturned pots. So the upturned pots are essentially maybe 300 years ago, but the shattered pottery that we found, the bits of clay pot we found in the stream further down, we've carbon dated those, they're not carbon dated, we've had them dated based on the pattern to be somewhere between 1400 and 900 AD. So they are old. So this is interesting because the local people don't know if anybody's been up there. So that begs the question, was it a different tribe at that time, all of those years ago? There has been a lot of movement in Africa. There's been a lot of migration, the Bantu migration from the central areas down to the south.
Wait, quick question here. So
yeah,
the people that were up there, they probably wouldn't come down or couldn't come down, and they had to, they must have gone up there when the landmass didn't look like that, and then maybe they were trapped up there when it changed. Otherwise, how would they get up there?
Well, that's a possibility. However, I think the pots are ceremonial. So in a sense, you would have had a sort of witch doctor type figure, and he would have been a rainmaker, somebody who just prayed to the gods for the rain. And in African folklore or mythology, that is a very important role. That's a very important position. So I think, based on the pottery, that this man would have scaled Liko to place the pots and then somehow come down. I'm not sure if there would have been a community living up there, because we didn't find evidence of that. The pottery is evidence of human visitation a long time ago, but the way the pots have been placed and where the pots are suggests that it's ceremonial. And if it's ceremonial, then it implies that somebody like a witch doctor figure, a rainmaker man or woman, would have gone up there to make the offering and then somehow got down, and he would have climbed up, I guess, using very rudimentary rope and ladders made out of vines and poles and bamboo poles or something like that. It would have been extremely dangerous and very treacherous. I mean, the age difference between the pottery is quite substantial. I mean, the latest pottery we found is probably 300 years old, and then the pottery before that is going back to, 600 to 900 years old.
So what's your thought? Like very hardy people made a trek, maybe a religious trek up to the top of the mountain to make offerings over time?
Well, I think very, very occasionally. I don't think it would have been a very frequent thing. I mean, like I say, based on the pottery, it implies that there were quite large time gaps between the offerings. Yeah, so there we go. I mean, it opened a new door to the mystery of Mount Lico. We weren't expecting that because the local people didn't know of anybody who'd been up there. So
how big is the area up there? Are you able to get an estimation? It's
not a particularly big mountain. It's about 1 kilometer across. So it's got a diameter of about, it's essentially a circle or an oval, and there's and the diameter is essentially about 1 kilometer. So it's not a massive site, and that's probably why we are coming to it later in the day after, because like I say, we started this work in about 2005. So we've been essentially working our way through the very large mountain massifs that we find in northern Mozambique, like Mount Mavu, like Mount Namuli, like Mount Mulanje in southern Malawi. These are big. They are large massifs covering hundreds of kilometers squared, and rising up to over 3,000 meters or 2,000 meters, etc. So Liko is essentially just a small one. It's a very small one in comparison to the others that are in that area. But what struck me when I looked at the satellite imagery was just how interesting it was. It looked like a crater. It looked like a volcano full with a basin of forest, albeit a very small one with a kilometer, with a crater rim about a kilometer across. But I mean, the interesting thing was, it occurred to me at the time is maybe you can't get there, and if you can't get there, then the forest will be very unique and very special. So that's the basis that was the basis of the expedition, and the local people confirmed that they knew of nobody who'd ever been up there. So we went up there thinking that we would be the first people ever to sort of walk into this place, but that didn't turn out to be the case. We found bits of pottery, but all of the pottery, like I say, was by the stream, and we found some upturned pots which were ceremonial plates. And then speaking to archaeologists who are involved in African mythology and certainly the use of pottery, then basically the conclusion came to this is a rainmaker mountain, and they were being placed by a professional rainmaker who's essentially a medicine man who would have been sent up by the community to pray for rain.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Are there any animals up there? Like, how long were you up there, and how much did you explore? Is it just like virgin forest, or what did you see?
Yeah, there's plenty of animals up there, really. I mean, it's only a small forest, so it's difficult to. You wouldn't expect things like elephants or even monkeys really too much, not in a kilometer across. But we put some camera traps out. We heard bush babies, which are small primates. They're in the trees up there. We saw them, but we didn't really get any proper good photographs of them. I did record their call though, so you can. They are galagos, which are little. They're essentially night apes, a bit like the loris type characters, the lorises that you find. And then the camera trap pulled out things like antelope. There's three. We got 3 antelope on one of the stills there. So, I mean, how did the antelope get up there? I mean, I guess if you look at a lot of mountain goats, they can essentially almost climb vertical cliffs. So I think that's probably how these ones got up there as well. They might have been chased up by, I don't know, wild animals a long time ago, or even by fire, or even by humans trying to hunt them. But there is a small group of antelope up there. We didn't come across any evidence of carnivores. We didn't come across any evidence of things like leopards, although it would be a perfect place for something like a leopard to hang out. We did a lot of small mammal trapping, so we came across little shrews and mice and rats, pounced rats. That's probably quite a large rat, although it's quite different to what one would think of as. And then, lots of other things, really. We looked at the amphibians, we looked at the reptiles. It looks like we got a new species of gecko, a tree gecko. We got a new species of frog. In the one stream at the center of the basin, we found fish. These fish are mountain catfish, little barbels, about a couple of inches long. They're new. And also in the stream, we found crabs. So new species of crab, new species of fish, new species of gecko, new species of frog, and we think a new species of shrew, a new species of small mammal, and a new species of as well.
I figured you would see lots of new species there, or if there's one that's the same, in the lowlands, you could sequence both and see the differences to get an idea maybe of, using molecular clocks, how long living creatures have been up there. Any estimate on how long the feature has been there, when it was last connected to the land around it?
Yeah, we're working on that. I mean, in terms of the DNA, the sequencing of the animals, that's exactly what we're doing. We are, obviously DNA is used a lot in taxonomy these days, so the animals are being sequenced and they are being compared to their closest relatives and the very similar species that you found on the other mountains in the area. And really, that's how you determine that they are distinct. That's how you determine that they are different or that they're new, is when the sequencing. I mean, obviously, you can look at the morphology as well. I mean, there's nothing wrong with morphological taxonomy. I mean, that's how it's all done in years gone by. But the DNA will tell you for sure, the differences, the molecular difference between, this type of frog of this genera from Liko, and this type of frog from this genera from Mount Lico, for example. And yeah, when we do the analysis, we're looking at divergence dates as well to see when these animals diverged. So we've got some of that data. I mean, you're talking millions of years that these species, millions of years ago, that these species became distinct. So I'm writing a big paper on this at the moment, which is bringing the results of all the 15 years of research of biodiversity survey, or the results of the biotic investigations from this part of Africa, and also linking that in with the abiotic, so the geology and the climate and the geotopography, and just bringing it all together to basically, essentially, sort of create a new eco-region for this part of Africa, because the evidence base is there, and we've been finding a lot of new species in pretty much every taxonomic group over the last 15 years, and they are distinct from this area, this region of Africa, this mountainous region of Africa. But
do you think that anyone lived up there, or maybe died up there, or was sacrificed up there? Like, how long do you think it'll take you to explore? Are you going to go back and explore the place so that you know everything about it, or is this enough for now?
Well, I've already been back once. The main expedition was in May 2018, and then I returned just last year, just at the end of last year. I think it was in about October 2019, this time with a Japanese film crew. And that provided me with a good opportunity to have a look again. That's when we picked up a few other interesting bits and pieces, such as the tree gecko and crabs and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, the whole of the anthropology, the anthropological side and the archaeology side of Liko, it remains to be properly investigated. We are ecologists, we are conservation scientists. We're not archaeologists, and so we are really just we're really just scratching the surface for Liko, and I think it's the start of a mystery which is starting to unfold, but still the story is not clear.
Have you thought about bringing up one of the local tribes people and having them make an offering, doing like a ceremonial type thing that would really ingratiate you with the local people? Getting one of them up there when they normally couldn't, and doing a current offering.
Well, the community, before we do any of these expeditions, we go through the local chiefs, we go through the local communities, we work with, we have counterparts in Mozambique, so we bring people up from the National Natural History Museum in Maputo, the capital. We work with various Mozambican research institutes and outfits. The expedition to Mount Lico was a very global gathering. We had a lot of Mozambicans from the museum, the Natural History Museum, from the Department of Agriculture, from the Gorongosa Field Research Unit. And then also on the team, we had people from Brazil, people from South Africa, people from America, people from the UK. What else was there? There was a lot of nationalities, so it's very global. But before we even attempt to go up Liko, we go through the local community, we go through the local chiefs, and we ask for their blessing. So we then walked up with the chiefs from all of the communities, who all gathered together. We walked up to the base of Liko before we started climbing, and then they did a ceremony to ask the spirits of the mountain to grant us entry and to grant us safe passage, and to ask for their blessing for us to visit the forest on Mount Lico. And it was quite a special ceremony. It involved a lot of chanting. It involved pouring of flour from the hand into a mound. So you just had a bag of flour and you poured it, and you made a sort of mountain of flour, small mountain of flour, and then you poured various drinks over that, and then the chicken was also provided for the gods and the chiefs. So there is, and that's not just that doesn't happen at Liko. We've done that at Habu, we've done that at Mount Namuli, and so there is a process we go through before we we enter into these areas. We don't just turn up and we don't just say, hey, we're here, now we're going up there. We ask permission. We go to the local communities. We involve them. We go to the chiefs. Now, taking somebody up there, I can't remember. I don't think any of them wanted to go up. Really, they said it was too frightening.
Really, they didn't.
But I think we did offer to say, do you want to just a few of them want to go up the ropes, or whatever. But they all declined. But I think.
Were they afraid for you? Were they asking you not to go, or were they just like, hey, if you want to go there, fine?
No, they weren't afraid for us, and they wanted to know why we wanted to go there. And that's often the case. I mean, and that's fair enough. I mean, the local community want to know what we're doing. What's our interest. We often get one of the common things. They don't understand that we want to look at the frogs or the butterflies or whatever. A lot of them think we are after gemstones or something like that. I mean, we get that commonly. What gems are you looking for? You're looking for gems or gold or something like that. And, so we have to talk them through the process that we're not at all interested in any of those things, and we're just interested in butterflies and frogs and crabs and fish and things like that, and plants, and how it all fits together, and that we're essentially ecologists, and also we're conservation scientists. I mean, this is all about generating the evidence base to highlight. Liko itself isn't threatened because it's completely inaccessible, so I'm not really worried about lots of people turning up to go up there or something like that. I don't think that will happen. And it's also very remote and very difficult to find. But for the other sites, the other mountains in Northern Mozambique, that's not the case. They're very accessible. They're very threatened. They are being destroyed in terms of the natural forest is being cut down quite fast. And there's a lot of poaching, and all of them are unprotected. So Liko in itself is secure and safe due to its inaccessibility. But all of the other mountains that we've been working on not. And what this is doing, the expeditions to Liko, the media attention, even this interview, it's drawing attention onto the threat and the plight of these mountains and the case of these mountains in this part of Africa, in northern Mozambique, and also the unique biodiversity that they're holding. So they have very small forests compared to something like the Amazon or the Congo, whatever, but they're very highly diverse, and so they have high levels of endemism. So these are animals or plants that are found nowhere else in the world. So per square meter, they've got a high level of endemism. They've got a high level of animals found nowhere else in the world. And that's what makes them special, because these forests are essentially relic outlying patches of what was once a much larger rainforest belt coming from Central Africa all the way down Southern Africa. And then post-glacial ice age, the forests have retreated, and they've left these montane patches of isolated forest. And then in these isolated forests, speciation has occurred. Animals tend to speciate faster than plants because of they regenerate faster. Then they have speciated. So you've got, in each of the forests, you've got unique animals and plants that are even different from the neighboring mountains. And that's very special. And that's what makes this part of Africa, northern Mozambique and the mountains of southern Malawi, very unique and very special. And all of them are unprotected pretty much. And so that's why we need to highlight the biodiversity case for their protection.
Were you afraid to go up there? Or, I mean, you probably didn't expect anyone up there, but were you at least, I don't know, did the stories worry you, or you're seasoned and you thought there'd be nothing up there except animals?
No, I wasn't afraid at all. I mean, I've been running expeditions in this part of Africa since the last 30 years. I've run over 50 expeditions in rainforest in Africa and mountains. There was nothing that really was going to frighten me up there. I don't think there was, we collect snakes. It doesn't matter. So, no, not really. I mean, it was really just getting the climb out of the way. The forest itself was complete fascination. It was not at all any sense of fear.
Have you just spurred interest? Like, next time you go back, is there a next time? And will archaeologists now come with you? Will anthropologists? Like, what's next for this area? Or, you've cataloged it and we're going to move on?
Well, in a sense, we've already, and then end of last year, I went to check out another site, and that's going to be the destination of the next expedition, Mount Lico. But Liko, there's certainly one more visit to Liko, because we would like, now the results are coming through of what we sampled on the first visit. That then opens up doors and formulates a whole series of other questions that are based on the first set of results. And the only way you can answer that is through looking at other aspects of that particular environment on Liko. So I think there is, and that's very much the case for the climate change analysis. We dug the big soil pit, we went down 7,500 years, and now we're analysing the pollen grains that we found at the different intervals going down through that soil strata. And that will tell you what was around and what was alive 10,000 years ago, for example. But on top of that, I saw another gecko going up the tree, which we didn't manage to photograph or catch, and it's very different to the other one that we found. So, I think there's more stuff to find on Liko. Certainly one more trip would be very useful, very interesting. It's always good to go at a different time of the year, because at different times of the year, then you've got different things, out. Different animals and plants either flower or they emerge at different times of the year. So straddling your visits always pretty much gives you a different sample set from the time before. So going at a different time of the year, maybe 6 months apart or something like that, would be very constructive and very useful. So certainly there's one more visit to Liko, and hopefully we can sort of maybe add that on to the next expedition to the next mountain we're going to go and look at, which is Mount Lico.
Yeah, and I know you don't know yet, but what's your guess on when it was formed? And how was it formed? Was your guess due to glaciation? Was a big rock mass left behind, or what do you think it was?
Yeah, it was formed about 500 million years ago. So it's an Inselberg made of igneous syenite granite. So basically, this was molten rock below the ground, if you like, a molten larval field, a molten bed of rock. And then under pressure, this liquid rock was forced up through cracks in the metamorphic rock, the rock that's found above it. And if you like, it bubbled up. And as it bubbled up, it cooled. And that's why these Inselbergs are often round and smooth and even table-like, because they are forced up and then they cool. And this is below the ground. And then over millennia, the softer metamorphic rock, which is the sort of the surface layer rock, weathers away, and as it weathers away, it exposes these giant granite bubbles that have cooled as they were forced up through the softer rock, and that's essentially what Mount Lico is, and essentially what all of the other Inselbergs in this part of Northern Mozambique are. And they vary in age between about 120 million years to about 1,000 million years. Liko itself is somewhere between halfway, probably around about 500 or 600 million years old.
So it's like a magma pimple that formed on the surface of the Earth and now is covered in forest and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. No, I mean, the question I think you might be wanting to answer is when did that softer rock that surrounded it weather away to such an extent that Liko then became isolated and you couldn't get up there. So that's a more difficult question to answer. But probably a long time ago, we're probably talking hundreds of thousands of years ago, Liko would have been inaccessible. It would have been isolated. I mean, to have the surrounding land weather to such an extent to, expose what was below the ground, to expose it as a mountain with a crater half a kilometer up into the air, it takes a very long time. So hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. But the DNA sequencing can tell you how long the species have been distinct. So it all depends if the species were evolved on Liko, or are they relics of a population from a forest that covered Liko, but now they're only found on Liko. So that's another question.
Very cool. I'm glad that you're doing this stuff. It's super interesting. I remember I saw a show about Ethiopia, for instance, and they had a a church that was way up at the top of this mountain. You had to like kill yourself to get up there, and then another one that was in a cave. And it's amazing that even though there's inaccessible places like this, people have been there. They place pots and everything. So it's really cool what you're doing. Really cool.
Cool. So I mean, the age of exploration is not over. People think it's something that happened 100 odd years ago, but there are still places to explore. I mean, we might not be the first humans ever to go set foot in these places, but we are the first biologists to investigate this. So we are the first people looking at, in terms of finding out, identifying the plants and the animals. We are the first biologists to survey using modern techniques and modern taxonomy these mountains. So that's as exciting as being the first human ever to step foot. Well, if you're a biologist, if you're an ecologist, but essentially, like I say, this is all really about generating the evidence base to try and protect all of these sites in this part of Africa.
Well, very good, Julian. We're out of time. Where have you cataloged this expedition in particular and your other ones? Where can listeners go that want to learn more and see pictures and get a sense of where you've been?
Sure. I mean, I have a website. It's julianbayliss.co.uk. You can check out, there's a few albums. There's several albums from about, maybe 10 expeditions on there. There's a blog with interesting links. There's another link with web links. There's a contact page. You can drop me a line. You can email me if you'd like to know more or ask me questions or just say hello. Please do. If you go to my website, julianbayliss.co.uk, you'll find a lot more information and a lot more links to the expedition to Mount Lico and to other expeditions in this part of Africa as well.
Julian, I forgot to ask you, I believe there's a National Geographic film about the Lost Forest. Can you give listeners the title and how they access it?
Yeah, the expedition film, it's called The Lost Forest. It's on the National Geographic YouTube channel, and it came out, I think, on the 22nd of May. And it's a documentary, 22 minutes long, that covers the expedition to Mount Lico. It's made by Grain Media, and it's part of one episode in a series that were commissioned by the Nobel Peace Foundation. And they commissioned Grain Media to make a short series of documentaries on 5 of the last Nobel Peace Prizes and how the awarding of these prizes has gone on to affect work in the field. So we represent the Climate Change Award. And then the use of, that's the award to Al Gore and the IPCC, the International Panel of Climate Change. And we use a lot of the IPCC data, tables, analysis, methods in the work that we do, and particularly on this expedition to Mount Lico. So that's how that fits in. Anyway, the expedition documentary is a little treasure, a little piece of magic. It came out on the 22nd of May on the National Geographic YouTube channel. So please have a watch of that.
Very good. Well, Julian, thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Richard. Pleasure.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.